This is Dimitri Lascaris reporting for The Real News from the People's Summit in Chicago. The U.S. fossil fuel lobby seems to be having a political field day in the United States. In a few short months, the Trump administration is aggressively rolling back already weak environmental regulations, such as those limiting car and power plant emissions, protecting rivers and streams, limiting mining and drilling on public lands, and imposing a moratorium on offshore drilling in the fragile Arctic. President Trump has also proposed a reduction of the strategic petroleum reserves, which could strengthen the price of oil to the delight of oil producers. In short, the fossil fuels industry is partying like it's 1999. With us to discuss this is Steve Horn. Steve is a research fellow for DeSmogBlog and a freelance investigative journalist whose work is featured in The Intercept, The Guardian, The Nation, and Truthout. Steve joins us from Indianapolis. Thanks very much for coming back on The Real News, Steve.
Hey, thanks again for having me. I appreciate it.
So I'd like to start with the Strategic Petroleum Reserves, or SPR as they are known. And I understand the U.S. government has 687 million barrels of federally owned oil stockpiled in Texas and Louisiana as an emergency energy supply. Why would President Trump seek to reduce these reserves? Who's pushing for this and why?
Yeah, well, this is a concept that's been pushed for several years now by basically this isn't just a Trump initiative. This has been pushed by, first and foremost, the Heritage Foundation, which has penned a lengthy study making their case for why the strategic petroleum reserves should be bottomed out. And furthermore, ExxonMobil in particular and others in the oil industry have lobbied for this as well over the past several years. So it's kind of been quietly happening behind the scenes, and then sort of all of a sudden it appears as a clause in Trump's budget proposal. And in the days since that has taken place, another outfit, the Institute for Energy Research, IER, which is funded by Koch Industries, they have also now written a report making the case for the bottoming out of the SPR. And so basically there are a lot of oil industry and petroleum industry interests pushing this, and I haven't fully wrapped my head around why, but I think that one of the major reasons is that investors in particular see the SPR and the prospect of it being bottomed out as an investment opportunity. There already are a lot of other private inventories where the investors are able to invest capital, like in Cushing, Oklahoma. There's a huge tank farm, in Patoka, Illinois, a huge tank farm of oil and gas, petroleum products, and basically that are sort of a Wall Street investment cash cow. I see that sort of a similar thing may develop with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and the potential privatization of it. And so an Institute for Energy Research has distinctly called it a privatization in their newest report. I think that's the way to see it.
So it's not so much that it's anticipated to increase the price of oil, but rather that private investors will now have the opportunity to act as sort of a reserve or to hold reserves for the U.S. government, and this presents them with, as you said, an investment opportunity. Yeah,
and for investors in oil trading, often it doesn't matter if the price goes up or down because of hedging and sorts of bets that they make. Sometimes the price goes down, they can still make money depending on where they were betting on that particular investment. So I think that at the bigger level, and people who are looking at it from a national security perspective, often the price of oil is discussed, but from a trader perspective, it doesn't matter that much if the price is high or low. It might matter for the industry at large, and the global industry, but for many investors, it doesn't matter that much.
And you indicated ExxonMobil was supportive of this reduction. Was the company lobbying for this reduction when Rex Tillerson, the current Secretary of State, was its chief executive officer?
Yeah, they were. There's nothing on file for the first quarter of this year that says that Exxon is currently lobbying on it, but that means de facto everything before that, he was the CEO for the past decade, and the lobbying did take place in the past few years while he was still the CEO. So that's important, of course, given that things like this are something that the Department of Energy would be a part of making this decision and overseeing the potential privatization of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, but so would the Department of State, obviously, as a national security, diplomatic endeavor. I think that foreign policy endeavor. Of course, Rex Tillerson would, at least be briefed on this sort of thing, and of course, his company was lobbying on it before he became the Secretary of State.
So this brings us to the whole question of conflicts of interest in the Trump administration. Tillerson said during his confirmation hearing that he would recuse himself for a year from, quote, any matters that might come before the State Department that deal directly and specifically with ExxonMobil. And please discuss an apparent conflict of interest you wrote about in your recent article entitled Tillerson Present as Exxon Signed Major Deal with Saudi Arabia During Trump Visit.
Yeah, well, the headline kind of summarizes it, but some of the details are that when President Trump took his extravagant visit to Saudi Arabia, one of the things that was taking place alongside that visit was a CEO forum or convening in which CEOs of a lot of oil and gas companies and other companies met in Saudi Arabia concurrently with Trump's visit, and he went on that trip with Rex Tillerson, with his top economic advisor, Gary Cohn, with his Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross, and others, including his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. And while that Trump trip was taking place and the media sort of was honing in on what was taking place there, the CEO forum was also taking place. And at the CEO forum, ExxonMobil's current CEO, Darren Woods, was present. He was a speaker there. And during that forum, I guess at the end of it, they signed, they signed some sort of deal that was about a study. And that study pertained to a joint venture refinery down in the Gulf Coast that's co-owned by ExxonMobil and SABIC, or Saudi Basic Industries Corporation, which is the Saudi state-owned company that owns refineries and other oil and gas industry assets. And that refinery is not in place yet, but it's moving forward. It just got massive subsidies from a local government, county government, school district down in the Gulf Coast, San Patricio County, which is where Corpus Christi, Texas is located, and that plant will be close to Corpus Christi. So basically, bigger picture, many have probably seen ExxonMobil's commercials on TV where they're talking about growing the Gulf. This particular plant is a big piece of that plan, on which they are going to have this new cracker. It's called a cracker facility because it refines plastics, or refines natural gas obtained from fracking into plastics. And so they signed this deal. And then right after they signed the deal, Woods went from the forum back to the Saudi royal palace, in which Donald Trump was there, Tillerson was there, and they had sort of an additional signing ceremony and a photo op. And if you look at where my story came from, if you look at the Saudi media, not the American media, but the Saudi state media, you see pictures where they were all together in this same exact room. Maybe in Saudi Arabia, they didn't realize that this may have very likely been sort of in defiance of Rex Tillerson's 1-year recusal period, but I did notice it, and so that's sort of the nuts and bolts of the story. What's going forward is that the group American Oversight has filed Freedom of Information Act request to learn more about Tillerson's role, to learn if he actually knew that Woods would be there. So this is an ongoing investigation, but what's already known is that he may have acted in defiance of that 1-year recusal period just by being present when this sort of thing was signed.
All right. Well, I'd like to talk to you next in part 2 of our interview about President Trump's withdrawal of the United States from the Paris Climate Accord and the rationale that he's offered to the public for doing that. Thank you for joining us, Steve.
Yep, thanks for having me.
And this is Dimitri Lascaris for The Real News.